This Community Board. This is Community Board 2 Manhattan Landmarks Committee meeting, the first for the month of January. A subsequent meeting will be on Thursday of this week. We have one application this evening for 139 Thompson Street. If any members of the public are here for 27 East 4th Street, that has been canceled and is anticipated with reasonable certainty for next month. The if you hear about it, you know that the Merchant's House is very much connected to this project, and they received no advance notice in order to be able to prepare their testimony. 27 East 4th Street. Application is to demolish an existing building and to construct a new building. That's the one that's laid over?
That's the one that's laid over, yes.
For tonight, 139 Thompson Street. Application is to demolish an existing building and construct a new 6-story residential building.
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
welcome.
Welcome. I'm Susan. I'm the vice chair of the committee. Chenault is the chair, and he's chairing remotely.
Wonderful. Nice to meet you. I'm Richard Unzatina from EDG, representing the client.
Very good.
All right.
I think we're ready for you to begin, Richard.
Okay, wonderful. I'm just going to share my screen.
And you speak up just a bit, please.
Yes, you bet. So can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. It's just my microphone. My apologies. Can you see my screen okay?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes, now we can.
Okay, perfect. All right, I shall begin. Okay, so this is the Sullivan-Thompson District. As you mentioned, we're just at the sort of north end of that on Thompson Street, 139 Thompson. Here are some historical photos of 137 and 139 Thompson. You can see it a little better in totality on the left, and a little cutoff on the right there. Buildings from 1875 by George Holtzite. Twin buildings, really, with the exception of the triangular pendant on the top of 137. And the brackets are slightly larger on 137 than 139, but largely very much an imitation or a twin. Here are some photographs of the building. I'm sure you know it today. It's been like this for about, well, I guess 6 years, really. Shrouded in scaffolding on all 3 sides, front, back, and side, where the interstice is at the neighboring building there. And I'm going to get into a little bit of the history here as to why that is. This building is filled with about 750 to 1,000 jack posts because the entire structure is really failing. The brick in the bottom right image is the Windsor pin test. When we drove pins into the brick, they simply shot right through the brick. The bag in the upper right image, the photograph, is really remnants of both brick and mortar. It really crumbles. You can pull some out directly by hand. In the upper left, that's a foundation image. You can pull some of the foundation blocks out by hand as well. And the bottom left and upper left, you can kind of see the spacing is 3 to sometimes 1.5 foot spacing all along the full east-west runs of the building. Now, these joists that run north-south, most of them are degraded. They're slipping from their pockets within the masonry. They're really in terrible shape, and the deflection, the allowable deflection, is far exceeded here, such that it's really a dangerous condition, something that can potentially be like a pancake collapse. So essentially, as these joists pull out of the brick itself, it's degraded, mortar shot. I mean, you're going to have a catastrophic collapse. So it's definitely a a safety issue. And these will come down floor by floor by floor by floor all the way down. And I'm going to get into the next diagram, which really shows why you have these jack posts. So essentially what we've done is we've opened up the floor all along the full lengths at every level through this building, all the way up to the roof. And so this really sandwiches the joists and supports them from the stable foundation, which we've determined is stable, and ran that all the way through, just supporting all members all the way along. So this is why the building is shrouded in scaffolding on all three sides, as you see it today when you walk by. We went to the Department of Buildings, talked to the forensic department, and got a CCD1. They determined that a new code needs to be used on this building. Essentially, this building needs to come down. There's really no structural integrity to the building. And so really it's just about very smart, careful demolition. There's a very careful accounting of the building and the facade. Historically, we've come to understand this building very well, in particular its facade and all around. But the building itself really needs to be a new building, remade exactly as it is today as the twin of 137. I'm going to just jump to an aerial view. So here you can kind of see it. It's on all three sides, the scaffolding all the way up to the roof. And the lighter blue color that you see is waterproofing, essentially waterproofed up and over the parapets and so forth, trying to keep as much water out as possible. I mean, we don't want this to degrade even further, which is, it's hard to do, but nonetheless, when water gets in, that's troubling. So we've, done our best to kind of really shore this thing up and ensure no water gets into this building at all. I'm going to jump to the front elevation. So we're really sort of squarely in the middle of this block, 171 Prince to the left, and then all the way north to the Franciscan Friary on the right. And then there's the little interstices between us and 145 Thompson. Jump to a little bit of a close up here, and you can really see the twinning, right? This is an amalgamated image here, and you see at the top on 137, as I mentioned earlier, the triangular pendant. That's really markedly the difference. And then I know in the photoshopping, sometimes it looks like there's foregrounding of the top cornice and frieze and so forth, but they're in fact aligned. The brackets themselves that are underneath the soffit are slightly larger, as I mentioned, on 137. But the intention here is to really replicate exactly the armature and decoration of 137 on 139. And all of the parts that you see above the lintel heads and the sills, they have these lovely little brackets underneath the sill plate as well as the lintel. Now, in fact, some of them have broken off on 137. So some of them aren't even intact necessarily. And also the same holds true for 139. We are going to salvage all of it as much as humanly possible, because some of those components are cast iron. So not subject to the same degradation as the masonry. So the intention is to keep all of those components and keep all of the datums all the way through from 137 across 139. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the base datum as well, because you can kind of see over time, things don't kind of hold true to the original historic vision, which is unfortunate. The neighbor has a rounded awning and a big drum for the security gates. On our building, not such a pretty awning. And then, a sort of plastered across band and a big shop window. And I'm going to get into how we are going to address that as well. Here's another close up just from the side. You can kind of see in the interstitial space, there are some pocketing of openings and some push and pull on the facade and some chimney heights along there. Now this is from down the street, just north a little bit, looking at it. You can kind of see the roof line there, and the bulkhead beyond, and again, all of the scaffolding around the structure. And I'm going to jump back now to the aerial view to show the bulk of the building, obviously stripped of its scaffolding. And in this case, you can kind of see now the bulkhead. And what we're proposing is to put a little bit of a pop-up unit at the back, at the rear. And I'm going to walk you through some imagery that shows that. So the bulkhead is on the south end, aligning with the bulkhead of 137. We just felt that setting it back, and in conversations with landmarks, that's the appropriate thing to do. And it makes sense even internally. And here's just an elevation, a line drawing. You can kind of see 137 on the left, and then our building here, which is just by the interstice. The bulkhead sort of aligns right beside theirs, and then you see the penthouse just beyond. And then this is a rendition of that. So you see a little bit of that bump up on the rear. And so what we've done is actually on that interstitial facade, what was had a few of the openings in the push and pull, those chimneys, we've actually flattened that all the way across. And it's not as stucco as it was in yesteryear. It's in fact a brick. So it's unified. It has a unified facade. Front, side, and rear are now all encapsulated in a brick facade. And you can just see above the line of the parapet that comes across, there's a little bit of a setback, and that would be a metal panel that we would panelize that upper portion in the rear, much like a tenement artist loft of yesteryear. And then again, I'm going to touch on it a little bit later as well, but again, you can kind of see working from top to bottom, you see the twinning of the two buildings, you see the bracket differences from 137 to 139. And in this case, another market difference that I want to draw your attention to is through conversations with landmarks, we've actually removed the fire escape. Their feeling was that, you don't necessarily need to put the fire escape back. You can go without it. It doesn't necessarily, we're not going to use the fire escape. When we rebuild the new building, the intent is to make everything completely accessible and put in an elevator, as well as a new core through the building, a stair core. So you'll have a complete fire compartment internally to take you out. You won't have to rely on that front fire escape. I'm going to jump now to further up the street. So again, this is that same view looking back at the building. And you can kind of see now that facade is more flattened on the north facade, and in fact all brick. And there you can see just above it, you've got the stair bulkhead, and then the penthouse just coming up a little bit. And then we've just screened the mechanical equipment as well. And then this is a side elevation. So this is a 50-foot street. And so when you're standing across the street, you really don't perceive it at all. Much like the rendition, you're really just going to see a little bit of that side wall of that rear penthouse unit. You won't perceive any of this from the street. And we just angled it back as well, just again, not to create any real bulk assertion, just, for the neighbors and so forth. And just to speak about this elevation a little bit, the front windows, as it turns the corner just to the left on this elevation, they're 2/2 to match the front windows as well. And then everything else just is a fixed window. Just jump to this now, and this just shows a sort of juxtaposition between the front elevation and then the side elevation. And again, I'm going to speak a little bit more on the next couple of slides, in particular about our base condition. But again, this is just a measured drawing, just showing, all of the surveyed components. We're matching everything from 137 all the way across, all the datums. the floor levels aren't going to change, and the visual from the street does not change. And here I'm going to now talk a little bit about the base. So that base that I showed earlier really has a sort of parged portion all the way across underneath the brackets. And actually, I can jump back to the historical photos from the sort of late 20s, and you can kind of see it's actually present, that there isn't really much of a water table below that first set of residential windows. So what we did do, and I don't know if you can see it, just in the upper right hand side from the historical photos, and again in conversation with landmarks, looking at the twin building of 137, this is really when the storefronts were built out slightly into the street, encroaching into the public right of way a little bit. And so you kind of see that build out a little bit. I don't know if you can see it. I can kind of zoom in a little bit on the image, I think a little bit here. But our building is just to the right, in the upper right of that historical image, the black and white image. So that it's really very much a nondescript band above on our building, but 137 has that crenellation and that articulation and movement above the storefront. So our intention really was to, in fact, bring that back on our building to essentially quote the past, albeit its sister twin, and put that back on our building and get rid of that sort of barnacle awning, and just sort of unify it a little bit more. And again, in this elevation, you see the four engaged columns, those cast iron columns. We're keeping all of those. Those are extant to the building. We're going to keep those. And in fact, then we'll step the facade, as you can kind of see. I don't know if you see my cursor moving, but down, we'll step the facade back and then have the door set back. And then where the central window is, we'll set that back as well. And also the three windows along here. So we'll preserve this sort of central access, or the appearance of that central access. But in fact, the real entry will be on the left-hand side. But we want to keep as much of the existing ornament as possible. And then above the glazing, we didn't just want, this is going to be a residential building, so you're not going to have street signs on this building. But what we wanted to do was put in a louver band. And we didn't necessarily want to stop there, that, okay, you're going to see a louver band. It's ubiquitous. You do see it in the streets. But we wanted something to hearken, again, back a little bit more, introducing a very subtle vertical screen in front of the louver, just to add a little filigree and have more of a kind of ornamental quality that would just speak better to that kind of lovely datum across the top. And then just one more final point, the mullions themselves won't just be the sort of flat cap mullions. They would have a little bit of a fin on them. So again, a little bit more of a filigree, a little bit more nod to the ornamentation. And again, this was through conversations with landmarks, which we found quite fruitful. I'm going to just jump now here. So again, all datums, all dimensions, all matching 137 throughout. The cornice has been carefully documented. So we really are going to do that in a fiberglass, and you can capture all detail. And then anything that is missing, that isn't on the facade, we're cataloging. And we have a long history of doing this on many buildings in New York City. And in particular, this client of ours is very historically minded and wants to do always the right thing. So we will keep all and salvage all that can be salvaged on the facade, and then restore exactly as 137 is and 139 are today. And then here you can see the window 2/2. And the interesting thing here is these windows, when we do replace them, they will be in appearance as a 2/2 double hung window, but in fact they'll be brand new insulated IGUs. So they'll be better for sound for the inhabitants on the inside, and certainly better thermally for comfort and so forth. We have worked extensively with Landmarks just on the brick choices for both the front and side facades. So we have approved brick colors and so forth. We worked extensively with them on that. Here I'm going to just jump again to some of the detailing at that front facade. So here you can kind of see now the shaped facade in the central upper photograph. So again, that's being brought back. That doesn't exist today. It's completely flat, as you can see here, running all the way through, and then hidden by this blue awning. And so there's, we're trying to calibrate this with what was historically appropriate, and make sure that everything is as George Holtzite would have wanted. And you can kind of see here, we're just going to jump to the back. Now in the back, it's not visible from the street whatsoever, and the buildings at the rear are the same height and higher than our building. So really there's no visibility from any streetscape that you're going to see the rear. But again, we wanted to, have a sensitivity to the neighbors as well. So again, we're carrying the brick all the way around the rear. And I'm going to get into more of an axonometric here. You can kind of see the volumes of 145 beside where you have the interstice 137, which is directly adjacent, the twin. Now, this building, because we're rebuilding it as a new building, the existing rear yard is non-conforming. So 137 and 139 both have non-conforming rear yards at 2411. So they're not code compliant. So when we rebuild this building, we're in fact making a 30-foot rear yard. So you can kind of see it sets back a little bit from the neighboring building here, slightly, to make that 30-foot compliant rear yard. But what we have done is we've brought out a balcony to be essentially at the same face, aligning at the same face as 137. In the language of this balcony, we thought, because there is a fire escape in the rear with, vertical pickets and so forth, that we carry that language through. So there's a kind of through line, historical through line. And so across the facade, and I'll jump to the next image here, you can kind of see that picket run that crosses a Juliet and then come across the balcony and then continue as a Juliet. But that, in fact, that building face sets back from 137. And then again, you can see the brick coming up to the datum of the parapet to match 137. And then we're carrying the metal panel work just above, just to have that relationship with the side portion as well. And then in that central pier, we've just brought it right down to the balcony. We didn't fill the infill of brick right here. A minor detail. And then just glazing on the rear. And then you can kind of see, jumping to the front again, this is a sort of composite view showing all the way down to Prince Street there. This is it in its entirety. So you can kind of see 137. We're not touching it again. It has its fire escape and then whatever they've done to their facade, but you can see ours on the right there. And again, that metal would be in the sort of darker gray tones, much like what we're going to do on the upper reaches of the building. And that's it. I have an appendix of other material and so forth, but that sort of concludes what we were planning to do at 139 Thompson.
Thank you very much for such a clear presentation. I've written the entire resolution now.
Okay.
Um, I have a question about the north facade. Um, how can there be so many lot line windows, in particular the large ones?
Great question. So right now, they are in fact a lot line window, but there is that interstice. So I think what they'd like to do is just capture as much light as they can. They're not operable. They're all fixed windows, but I think for the
They
foreseeable.
conform to the ratio and all that sort of
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah, no, they conform to
Okay.
the ratio. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think they're just taking advantage of the time that there isn't a building there, with the full understanding that one day a building may in fact be built there and be abutting our building.
And it's
Uh,
clear design so they won't become illegal
correct. Yep.
apartments.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're all fixed windows. Again, the one on the left near grid line A, that was meant because it's so visible, and in conversation with landmarks, it's really just so that's the one you're going to see. They wanted that to be very much in keeping, and then everything else is really just a simple fixed glass window. But yes, everything complies with allowable openings, and they are not operable windows.
And the storefront is is it simply a neutral storefront or is it modeled on the presumed original? I didn't get its origin.
Yeah, no. No, it's a good question. I'm gonna jump just to I think we got the blow up earlier on. Um, it's really it is a modern storefront meant to look like yesteryear. Um, so you have
Didn't phrase it that elegantly, but that's what I said.
Yeah, no, we wanted to have the extra, and again in conversation with landmarks, you've got the little mullion cap here just to add the little filigree. You've got the screen in front of the louver band. We're keeping the four piers. We're stepping back all the metal work so that really the piers can shine. Um, but it's really not, it doesn't want to draw attention to itself, but also wants to play a very subtle role in, the aesthetics of it. And then the screen was really just through conversation, just having something that is nicer and more elegant and more decorative at that datum.
And
You
it
know,
served the practical purpose of masking the louvers, which are
correct. And then we're putting back a water table, which also has a practical purpose to a certain extent, and then really is a borrowing of what perhaps should have been there back in the day, which 137 had and then was removed. And then, it just sort of over time you get this hodgepodge of what you're seeing today, right? With
and
these
proper
awnings.
the operation of the windows that you said they simulate double hung, but operate in some other fashion. Is that
Yes. So they simulate double hung, but they're in fact casement windows. And then the ones at the lower level would be hopper windows. Um, because there's going to be a studio apartment in there. We wanted to strike a
no, but just
balance,
the operation? How do they open?
like a tilt and turn. So they can be both like a hopper, they tilt back, or they can open like a casement.
Okay, I believe that's Silt.
Okay, I have a
If
couple
anything
questions.
else wasn't clear, I'll come to it as we.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Did I hear you just say that inside that storefront, there will be a studio apartment?
That's right.
Okay, yeah, because that might, and so the entire building will still be multi-family residential or is it
It'll be entirely residential. So currently
a
there's
single family or multi-family?
well, it'll be apartments. So it'll be multi families in there
Yeah,
throughout the building. Yeah.
that's my question. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
But it'll be
Um,
entirely residential. So the community facility And I mean, interestingly enough, community facility over time, I mean, this is only a community facility district, so you should only have community facility, but the retail component is going away. It's all residential.
And I had a question, if you could help educate us, please, as to a CCD1, which doesn't appear to be a determination from DOB that it is a building that is, you know, in danger of like pancaking or something really.
No, sorry. Yeah, this didn't, this was as a result of much back and forth, because what we determined, the structural engineering arm of our firm, and then working also with MCRE, it was, we wrote extensive reports and did multiple tests on this building, showing how degraded it was, the mortar, the brick, the foundation. And then through the back and forth with landmarks, sometimes we had some responses where perhaps we could use older techniques to repair. We could sister some joists. We could do some grout repair. So really the CCD1 was to make very clear that new code needed to be used on this building, because we're going to affect more than 110% floor area. So it's really that because such extensive work needed to be done, we want to use new code, which is, you know, as structural engineers are want to do. You want to use the newest code for life safety. I mean, it's a serious hazard. Like it's no joke, this building. I mean, you've seen it like this for 6 years for a reason. So really it was just clarity on what code do we need to use. You need to use 2022 code for this, the newest code.
Right. You know, of course, that we all in the preservationist land have great concern about demolition by neglect. And, you know, so when an application like this comes before us and it's not just a non-contributing building, you know, where it's okay, one very clear way to look at the demolition. But in a situation like this, I'm just wondering, who is the actual determiner of whether the building is so derelict that it's not worthy of preservation, but rather of replication? And understand that this is not at all a comment about the quality of the building that you are proposing, but I'm just trying to understand this procedurally.
Right. No, I mean, our position was we wrote multiple reports, and this is why you see so many jack posts in here. It's unsupportable. So our feeling is, through all the multiple reports that we put forth, is that we have to use new code to rebuild this building, because nothing can be salvaged. It's not as if you can simply sort of inject grout or sister the joists in a way that would bring long-term safety to this proposition.
Right, but who is it that authorizes that? Is it LPC, I guess is my question. Is it LPC who says, yes, you've demonstrated successfully that, you know?
Well, I think it's also a conversation with DOB and forensics as well. I think,
Sure.
But
who is the official determiner, I guess, of that?
Through this process, I mean, I think everyone is a little loath to say, absolutely, it has to come in. We've given our report. MCRE has given their report. You've got these posts in this building. Our position is that this building needs to come down. We've run all the calculations. Listen, we always want to do as much as we can to salvage and not to have to rebuild. And this isn't a money-making proposition either. I mean, it's been like this for a long time, and it's not like it's, nobody wants it to get to this stage. But this is sort of where we've found this building. And I think ultimately through this process, what we're looking for is just a blessing to say, we understand the report. We've read all of the reports. We understand all the various conditions that you've presented. We've seen the data. We understand the data. Because there is a case where, I mean, you could try to sister this building, you could try to do these repairs, and then who's going to be the first one to say, well, let's start pulling all the jack posts out? I mean, it's
Sure.
really, I invite everyone to come to this site and really see it firsthand and really see how you can literally pulverize the brick in your hand, and the mortar is completely shot. It's a frightening situation from a life safety perspective. And
No, understood. I'm just trying to understand in the process of demolition of a building like this,
right.
where within the city is the determination that the deterioration is at the point where demolition is what is required rather than
Yeah, I think
restoration.
what we've done is, so through this process, originally what they were saying on the engineering consulting side for landmarks, that perhaps you can use some of these techniques, sistering, and to, inject, mortar and do these sorts of things. But what we found is you can't, because it doesn't make for a complete building system. And so
What-
through this
What
process,
agency gives this permission? Gives the
well, I think
to tear
ultimately,
it down?
ultimately, we get a certificate of approval to say what you're proposing is good. I mean, from the DOB perspective, I mean, they understand the sort of gravity of what's happening
Right,
here.
but they
And so
give the permission.
they give the permission, yeah, because
Okay,
ultimately,
that was what I think about
as
it.
engineers, we're presenting this data and we're saying this is unsafe. 3 engineers are saying this is unsafe, which really just sort of precipitated the whole thing. And so what we're now saying is, we want approval for what we're doing on the exterior to match this. And then through this process, now we have to provide demolition plans, and we have to provide that phasing plan, and we have to show extensively how we're going to actually reconstruct this. So we'll have to show our shoring of excavation drawings and our full structural set and so forth. But I think the first process is going through landmarks to get the blessing, and then the DOB ultimately.
Okay, thanks. Still a little unclear as to the sequencing, but I appreciate your answers. Thank you. Brian, it looks like you've got some questions.
Yes, I have several small questions, but let me follow up on that discussion we were just having about the sequence of the engineering, the reporting, and final approval. I think part of our question is this has to do with demolition by neglect. And so I was wondering if you could answer the question, how long has the present owner owned the building? Where does the responsibility go back to?
I don't think they had owned this building very long. And I don't have the engineer on record who actually worked with the city to vacate. It's the last thing anybody ever wants to do. But when we started to do repairs on the facade, and through those earlier approvals, when I said, the brick was approved and the brick color, through that process of simple facade repairs, we really realized, wow, the mortar's completely shot. And as we dug deeper, this is an asset I imagine. I mean, so this goes back to 2019. I don't think they had owned this property for that long prior to that. It was a fully occupied building. But through this process of doing facade repairs, we encounter this often. We start to work on a building and you realize, wow, this has incredible cracks running through it. And sometimes it's not apparent necessarily at the beginning. But it was through that facade repair program that we discovered all this, and then really started to open things up and realize that this is a much bigger deal. And I think our engineer was out there, you know, in the middle of the night. It was with the forensic department. I think, you know, it was a serious situation. We got the jack posts in there right away. When we see something, we have to really just get in there. And this owner was like, listen, we had no idea. I mean, once you start, I mean, a lot of these buildings of this age, you see when you go in, you know, the stairs are crooked and, you know, the floors are sagging and so forth. But when you start to touch things on the facade and realize, I mean, all of this is pocketing to the facade, right? So once you start to do facade repairs and you start to move things, things get much worse on the interior. So it really harkens back to 2019 when this all began.
So that new owner and that new engineer, they're the ones that put the jack posts in so that it wouldn't collapse.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me move on to a couple other minor things. I'm not sure, but I think in your documents that you, for the backyard, great that you increased the 30-foot legal yard. And did I see that you sketched up the balconies in two different places, one in the middle as you predominantly show, but also one where you had it on one side?
That's right. Yeah, I have that in the appendix, I believe. Yeah, we show it here. This was just sort of a little bit of a back and forth to see how that would look and
Yeah.
how it would feel. I think the preference is maybe to center it more, and that just gives more utility to both sides, both of the units on either side, and then doesn't create such a proximate relationship if there were to ever be a building.
Units. Yeah, well, I see that rationale, but when you mentioned that the setback, that the wall is exactly the depth of the balcony, I thought maybe tucking the balcony in the corner gives it a little protection from the wind, or I don't know. Just curious whether that was experimented with too. But I don't believe, since it's not open to view, that it's going to impact this application. So let me move on to also the question of the storefront. Yeah, I was taken by the fact that it looks like a storefront. It only has one entrance, as if it is totally commercial, and yet all residential. And the glass entry door and the side light, although perhaps more like a storefront entry than something else, I did not feel like it went with the residential use. And in fact, and that made me think about the windows on the storefront too. It's not a storefront. Do we have to go back to making it look like what it isn't?
No, I mean, there's a valid point. I mean, are you taking umbrage with the fact that the door is on the left too, or are you thinking more of a centralized door, or
No, not the location of the door.
just the fact that it looks like a storefront when in fact it's not a storefront?
We actually have quite a few examples in the village where the lower level is part of the residence, perhaps because it was built as a townhouse. Right. It's the street front is totally a residential character, and I see. That confusing element that it looks like, and it seems like a storefront or a store. Right. Then it's not. So I wonder about that.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you on that, actually. I appreciate that perspective, and I think we could certainly calibrate this to look less like something that it isn't, as you say. And let's just display it as what it is. I think safety was a bit of a concern, but I don't think that that's something that necessarily needs to, we don't necessarily need to bring that sort of metal panel as high, and maybe it's something with planter boxes and even the windows themselves, are you thinking something akin to what's above it?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
But
okay.
I don't necessarily have to push that direction. It would be great if there was some historical evidence of more of a residential look on the bottom. But we certainly could find other
Yeah.
townhouses or storefronts, Bleecker Street and so forth, that have that mixture. Now I'm going to finish up with one simple question about the detail of the penthouse above your brick parapet.
Yes.
Is that detail a little bit of a setback from the brick, as well as the difference in the material treatment?
It is. It sets back. You just go to the earlier. It sets back about 2 inches from the brick. So you'll see the line of the parapet kind of rake through. So brick, and then you'll see the coping, and it'll set back about 2 inches from that face.
Very good. I think that we like to see that. Thank you. I'm done.
And what is that material? You mentioned metal. What is it?
Like
Coated or something?
it's like a metal panel. I mean, what we've done is we've matched the look of zinc. I mean, zinc can be a kind of mercurial thing because it always kind of everything goes back to a sort of that gray. We thought to sort of do this in a sort of batten style, but do it in a color that wouldn't necessarily fade. So the color that is ultimately chosen will be the color that'll be in 30 years. It won't change over time.
Right. Can you tell us what that color is?
Yeah, it's like a pewter gray.
What gray?
A pewter gray, maybe a little darker
Thanks.
than
Yeah,
a pewter
yeah.
gray.
Thanks.
Sort of like his jacket.
All right.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And in terms of the approved, LPC approved brick, can you tell us how that relates to the sister building?
Yes. So through the process earlier on, as I mentioned in 2019, going back to then, there were approved colors. So the one that you see there, the 404 Croton brick, the front facade, that was the brick color approved essentially, to match 137 rather. And then that would return on the north face to the window, which is, I'm going to go to the elevation. So it would return there. And then we'd continue a sort of a more normal brick on that side, on the north side, and then on the west face as well.
Okay. Now, in the facade from the point of view that we're looking at now, the penthouse is kind of visible. I mean, it's more than minimally visible. You know, typically we see a mock-up. Obviously, in this case, that's not something you can do. So,
yeah. This is actually inside the other facade, so to speak. What we wanted to do, because they asked for a sort of vista in this particular image. The other one holds a little truer in terms of what you'll see. This is actually from across the street looking at it. So that's sort of what you would see across the street. And then that's what you would see down the street. And then the sight line itself, you can kind of see it here. So that one, you're absolutely right in the image that I showed you, but that was really just to set back far enough to do a composite rendering. This is really the true sight line at the 50-foot, and then what you'll see further down the block. And then again,
could we go to the down the block one? We're interested in any visibility, not just across the street.
right.
Can you enlarge this to give I'm looking to see the slope. Okay, where is the slope?
Right here. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, okay. And then behind that is another building.
Behind that is the bulkhead of the building behind.
And in the foreground of the building, where it's black, inky black.
This here is all on the other building.
No, I'm looking at the building itself.
Yes. So
toward us from the sloping section.
So this from here to here, that's the front of
No,
the
on top of the building. That
okay. You want me to trace that?
If you go back to the slope.
Yes.
And just toward us from the slope is a black wall.
Oh, this piece
What
here?
is that?
That is the wall of that setback apartment. So this, and then above that would be the door that needs access to its roof where the mechanical equipment would be. So this volume here that you see just in the foreground, that sets back slightly from that coping.
Yeah, okay, I understand which is which now.
Yeah, is that
the narrative, but not with the picture.
I see.
Are we finished? We'll have a lot to say in the business session.
Brian, do you have any other questions? I think we're finished here. We should see what the public has to say.
Susan, Dana wants to speak if there are no members of the board.
So let me promote Dina. All right, Dina, you should be good to speak.
Hi, yes, thank you so much.
Are you testifying on your own or for the?
So I'm testifying on behalf or speaking on behalf of Village Preservation.
Thank you.
So the committee knows this, but I'm the director of research and preservation for Village Preservation, and we often don't comment at the community board because we are just listening and taking in what everyone has to say. And in this case, we also will not comment on the new design or the revived design for the building. That's something that I'll bring to my committee to think about when the time comes to testify at LPC. But just for a project like this, we did want to just make a brief statement about the demolition proposal. And so sort of building on what Susan's questions were before and what others, the discussion, and I don't want to belabor the fact at all, but I did just want to give our statement. So Village Preservation always approaches any application like this with an extremely high level of skepticism, I'd say, just because, as we all know, there are thousands of buildings of this age and type and style in Greenwich Village and the South Village and throughout New York City that are not beyond repair, and that with the right degree of care and careful consideration can be repaired. And I'm not in any way doubting the applicant's presentation here and fully understand the safety issues are severe here, but it does come back to that question of demolition by neglect. How did it get to this point? Who is it who is proving that it absolutely must be taken down? Is there some sort of in-between that could be achieved here where more of the building is salvaged? And so we will certainly continue to take a close look to any materials that the applicant provides now and also in the future when you come to LPC. But we just believe that it's a very high burden of proof that needs to be placed on the applicant to prove, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this building absolutely needs to be taken down. And just to the point of the discussion that was being had about who the onus is on to kind of make that ultimate decision, I did also want to point out that the LPC commissioners, their task is to kind of look at a project like this twofold. A, should they be allowed to demolish? And B, what is the new design? And if we're just thinking about A, should demolition be allowed here? Certainly it's a contributing building. There's no doubt in anyone's mind that the only reason it should or could be demolished is if it's truly unsafe and can't be retained. And so, I think that really has to come from the Department of Buildings and or other consultants that the LPC engineers, consulting engineer, confirming that the building cannot be retained in any fashion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dina. I believe Pete would like to speak. Pete Davies, let me promote you, or no, I'll just.
Hi.
Hi, Pete.
Yeah, I put in the chat some information I just pulled quickly from DOB and ACRIS to fill in the timeline based on Brian's inquiry. And now I'm looking at the list of complaints that were filed at DOB over the course of a number of years. And I'm only doing this because of the question of the necessity of demolition. And clearly this building is in terrible shape. I am not in a position to judge if that condition arose within 5 years or 20 years. I have no idea. So whether or not when this owner bought this building in 2007, which is before the area was designated and came with new protections, what the intent of the owner was. But it does warrant some assessment, and I just think that is a very important question given the urge, the desire to preserve in our historic district. So anyway, I just wanted to provide that information for everyone. It's there in the chat, and other information is readily available online. So hopefully that will be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Right, I don't see any other raised hands. Chanel, do you have any further questions?
I have taken care of everything. Thank you.
Okay, all right. That takes care of that then. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your clarity.
Thank you very much.
We'll
Much
now have
appreciated.
the
You're very
business
welcome.
session to form the resolution.
Okay. Very good. Thank you all very much for your time.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I first want to speak about Brian's point about the front. This is something I never have heard of asking for before. And that the whole idea of this is to go back as close to the original. And I can't think that if we had an intact building, we'd ask them to change the entrance that's there because the use is being changed. I
I
just
think
don't
it's a
understand.
really
I
tricky
don't
question.
understand the reasoning.
I understand the reasoning, and I think it's a really tricky issue because when it's a storefront and it's a store, the appearance reflects the use. When a building is essentially being built from scratch, it's not, it's an interesting question because the raison d'etre of the storefront
I would think so if it were.
And so what happens is, we're always talking about how, our concerns about the Disneyfication of historic buildings. And there's something about, these kind of dummy storefronts that, it's bogus. But it's bogus for the right reasons, So it's a tricky question. I'm not actually sure what I think. I think I can see it from both sides. The thing is, it isn't when we recently saw one, I think it was on Hudson Street. And the memory of the actual storefront was still very strong. The building wasn't being rebuilt, the storefront was there. So the problem became how to handle that,
Right, that's the one
from
that
an
comes to
exterior
mind.
point of view, but that's different from this because this is a new building. So I don't know.
But aren't they trying to faithfully reproduce the one next door?
Yeah,
And it's not been changed.
right. And that's
Just
why
the
it's
design,
tricky.
never mind the use. And I can't think of, I can think of things done to Soho buildings because they have to be made accessible or because the door wouldn't work at all. But I don't think of a case where the design was changed in order to, if you will, change the historic condition to a present use condition for that reason.
Did the presenter tell us when the building was built? And I imagine these were built as tenements. So it could be that the historic record will confirm that it was a residential front facade originally.
Well, that would be another matter. Then the one next door then is, well, clearly the any of the storefronts are new.
Well, that's my question. And so if in fact someone came up with that proof that they were originally built as tenements with residential front facades and entry windows and so on, then then there's no question that that's the way it should be rebuilt in my mind. But we don't have that answer.
What we want is for it to be in the original manner then. And you're saying that it was probably not the manufacturing typical of Soho, but was. I understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but definitely not a loft building.
Well, that can surely be determined. So, and it's just not easy to find tonight.
Right. But I think it's an important.
Would do something along the lines of that it's in line with the original design, as they said they had modeled the storefront.
Sort of provided that, you mean?
And if it were residential, that a more residential look for the thing. That I understand that. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense.
The one piece of information we were presented tonight was the historic photo where the owners had put in a new storefront treatment with, in fact, projecting windows and then a center door, typical store layout. But that was not original. He did mention that, and they were then later replaced again. Anyway, so that's where that question kind of falls. We'd like more.
I would have been with a railroad flat on each side if it had been that.
Yeah, we should look at the designation report. Dina has shared
It's
that
easy to find. It's just not
that
there.
it was built as a pre-law tenement in 1875, according to the designation report. So we should have a look at
You
that.
found that.
Report. Dina found it.
Oh.
Thank
Good.
you, Dina.
Can Dina be upgraded so if we want to ask her something?
I think I can still speak.
Okay, good.
Yes,
Don't want to interrupt you.
If you
No.
will. In looking through the in the order of the presentation, the only thing I've found that we want to discuss, the penthouse and sort of the windows we want to discuss.
Excuse me, Chanel, before we move forward, we do have Dina. So if you would like to ask her more about the designation report.
Right. Do you have more to say, Dina?
So I just pulled that directly from the report that it was a pre-law tenement. I'm happy to do some digging for older photos if they exist, but I haven't done so yet. So that's all I
Okay.
know for now.
So then we will have the language suggested that, in particular, does everyone agree that a central door would be the key thing to the residential use?
No,
Not
Or would
necessarily.
it be a storefront with flats overhead? That would be
whichever is closest to the original building.
then if you could dig a little more, we'll confer before
Definitely.
get this as much as we
Thank
can.
you very much. Really, thank you.
Okay. For all the talk about it from across the street, it's the usual thing of what matters about visibility is from afar. This, to my mind, is more than we generally tolerate in Soho,
Agreed.
meaning it's way more than we tolerate in the village, but that's.
Brian, what do you think about the visibility issue?
I thought it was well handled, so it wasn't bothersome to me. I do look at those things from that definition of how much visibility there is and where does it cross the line.
Yeah.
There's no question that it's clearly visible, but the impact seems minimal. So that's how I kind of came down on that issue.
I'm most agnostic, I'm pointing out. So then we'll approve the penthouse.
That would be my vote.
I think so. I think once the applicant clarified what that massing was and what was the part that was the penthouse and what was behind it and all of that, that dark part that you had asked about, I think that helped us understand what it will actually look like.
Yeah, it doesn't jump into a silhouette, which is one of
Right.
the things we've
Yeah.
used.
Yeah.
And the other final thing is the windows. We have routinely said that tilt and turn windows are to be recommended for denial.
Mhm.
Yes, we often say that the double hung looking windows can be high performance. They meet all the performance specs, even though they may be operable in that way.
And generally, the upper part seems not to be operable in those that.
Correct.
That at least that's been presented as a reason not to have both sashes move.
Yes.
So we just recommend that they be double hung rather than tilt and turn.
Double hung appearance, you mean, as you say, fixed top, possibly.
Well, how else could they operate if they didn't tilt and turn, if then the appearance?
It's so we're just talking about various models of performance windows that may look like a double hung window, as long as the open and shut up appearance of the windows models after a double hung. So when the window is open, it looks like a double hung window open. That's all. I think that's what we've said before.
Yeah.
I mean, that's our criteria is both open and closed. It should look like the historic type windows.
Dina, your testimony was clearly important. And it opened up the whole question. Could you just write a consolidated thing along the lines? I made some notes, but they may be imperfect.
Yeah, sure. It's, I mean,
you know how they look. You've read.
yeah.
Um,
I'll email you. Yes.
how we, aside from the testimony about it, how we address the question of a building that's crumbled, that's been owned by the same people since 2007. That's a very long time ago. And we have before us a good example of the Dalbito Center. So I think this has to be confronted if there are penalties or whatever. We don't exact those, but we need to express the concern from Nita's testimony and Pete's as well, and our general concern that a building owned this long by the same people who are now pleading that it must be torn down needs strong consideration.
Oh, absolutely. I find the whole thing rather troublesome. I mean, I think, obviously nobody wants, nobody's in favor of dangerous conditions. So I don't think this is a matter of making a statement about that, but I think it's really important to separate out the two aspects of the proposal.
How did it get there?
And
that
the
it was
one aspect is the actual building, but we are in no way able to weigh in on whether or not an unknown bar has been met. That is for an agency to determine. And although the applicant's testimony regarding the deteriorated condition of the building was certainly compelling, and we have no reason to doubt that, the overriding concern here is in its precedential implications.
Did it get that way on purpose?
And, we understand, I tried to get the information, Brian tried to get the information, Dina was very clear in defining the issue as well. We don't know. We don't know if this building meets a standard because we don't even actually know. I mean, we can presume that DOB is the decision maker here, or DOB in conjunction with LPC. I mean, whatever the bureaucratic and procedural aspects here are, we really don't know. And I don't think that we should be making I don't think that we should be writing a resolution that tacitly approves certainly we shouldn't be writing a resolution that approves the demolition based on the huge holes that we have in our procedural knowledge here. We certainly know that what the applicant demonstrated, but what about the rest?
Based on the applicant's testimony, when the applicant has got to be in some measure responsible for the condition.
Right. So it's a bigger issue.
He said you don't know how long this has been going on, but
so it
certainly hasn't improved since 2007, and it's unlikely that it's remained stable. So it's directly on the applicant.
Right, and deteriorating buildings don't remedy themselves.
And they tend to deteriorate without attention.
And so may I make a...
So the first thing will be deny the...
Hang on. Oh.
Deny the demolition unless...
Yeah, regarding the demolition aspect, the way we the way the professionals look at the report about whether demolition is justified or not, who the applicant provides that report and says, yes, the conditions are that it has to be demolished. But the city needs to then verify the information in such a report. And in the case of this historic district work, we have had the lesson of the Dapolito Center that has taught us a lot about this procedure.
Exactly.
In this case, the applicant, the city, issued a report saying, oh, it's just terrible condition, we have to demolish, when there was no engineering to back it up. So there would be even no way for a third party to verify the authenticity or the verification of cost and so forth.
And the question of the one that we're having next month, which is different from demolition, it's destruction by affirmative action. I looked back over all the records for the prior application, and the Landmarks Commission engaged an engineer or an engineering consultant to review and detail and verify what was said by the engineer for the applicant. So
Well, that's good. That's good. That would be reassuring. We don't have that yet, but I think that needs to be one of our conditions.
Yeah,
that would be in one of the denial lists.
Yes.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Dana, can you say something about that, or
Yes.
am I right in making a parallel between this and 4th Street?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, LPC does have an engineer on call. The last I heard, it was Don Friedman of the firm Old Structures. I don't know that you need to put his specific name in, but they do have somebody who they regularly ask to review projects like this, where it's they want confirmation from an expert, because nobody at LPC is necessarily an engineering expert in this way. And they're not meant to be, they're meant to be
Right.
preservationists. So I think that, yeah, I would recommend that you, and I'm certain that Village Preservation will recommend that Don Friedman or whoever their consultant is absolutely must, affirm whether this building has to be demolished in order for us to be accepting of that.
And my mind has always pictured I can't remember what the building was that was a facade held up by metal bracing, and the whole thing was rebuilt around it. But we discussed it in relationship to this before. Okay, I've made good notes on what everybody said, so we'll come up with something to be looked at.
Okay, great. Good. Yeah, I think that, the demolition issue here is huge. And the other part of it is, it might be, well, you could save it, but you could rebuild, it's sort of like the applicant was kind of not saying that they couldn't, but that it would be better if. Well, I think, I would suggest that our standard needs to be a little higher than that. Can it be? Must the building be demolished?
Can anyone think of an instance where we've had a building of historic merit that was demolished? We have things like garages and what are known.
Well, that one on Christopher Street.
Or
Christopher,
Yes, that was
14
one.
Gay Street.
Yes, that one too.
Yeah,
Well, I could testify on its leaning.
74 grand.
I didn't walk on that side of Christopher Street until it was down.
Right. So, Christopher, Bleecker, Gay, 74 Grand Street.
There have been a few.
Okay.
Okay, and for new business, is it clear to everybody that we canceled 4th Street? Because the merchant's house had something like a day and a half notice before it was put on the website.
Yeah.
And today there came a building at 44 West 11th Street that we had heard some years ago that's just now getting around to its work. They have until 2028, and it was a question of the revocable consent. And I looked back and we approved all the front restoration, and Landmarks had approved it as well. So based on that, we just sent the notice to the transportation department.
Yeah, thanks. I saw the emails between you and Mark.
Right, but I don't do it unless you said I can by approving it. Thank you, Dina.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you, Pete.
thank you so much. Thanks to Dina.
And as I learned details about the coming 4th Street, I'll pass them along.
Great. Yeah, that's going to be huge.
And everyone can have a look at the vast material packet that I sent. And it'll give, oh, then maybe you know off the bat, the first application was rejected by Landmarks.
For 27 East 4th?
Yeah,
So it was actually approved by Landmarks.
the first one was approved too.
Much to the dismay of many.
And then the second one was approved.
Okay. Let me backtrack. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure about the first one. Good point. I can let you know. But the second one, the most recent one from a couple of years ago, was definitely
We have everything
approved.
on it. I couldn't find anything about the first one.
Okay.
If you are able
I'll look
to,
through our records.
it's as simple as did Landmarks approve it or not?
Yeah. Okay.
And that will help in my sort of preamble to the whole thing.
Understood. No problem.
Thank you all.
Okie dokie.
I'll get this along to you, Susan, before the next meeting sometime.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks, Chanel. Good night,
Okay, thank
everybody.
you.
Night.
Thanks, good night.